Are we there? So we explained to our men that we have to set a proper example. You will not do any such thing. Treat all bodies with respect. Hand them back to the enemy after the war. If they don't receive them, give them a proper burial according to the religious rites. And then various things you get from the pockets, the letters and all that to the family. See? Be decent. You have to respect the dead, no matter they are your own or your enemy. So now, that happened in Dera Baba Nanak. He captured that place and then blew up that bridge so that further attacks could not take place. That's in the north. Now we come to the Wagah sector. In the Wagah sector, we had two brigades which crossed. One little story here which I will inform you because it gives you an idea of the smells and sounds of battle. One was to cross along the main Grand Trunk Road. So we had a division crossing. Pakistan Air was very, very active. They had F-86 aircraft and F-104 aircraft, the American, which is superior to our own. And our Air Force was conspicuous by its absence. After the war, when we complained bitterly that where was our Air Force, the Pakistani was playing hell with us. We were doing counter-air. Counter-air means we were attacking their airfields. Anyway, Air Force also learned a lesson by 1971. They gave us better close support because you can do counter-air, but you must support the army on the ground. Otherwise, what's your purpose? Anyway, we advanced up to the Ichagal Canal and we went into defensive positions there. And we were very strong on the main Grand Trunk Road side. Slightly north of the Grand Trunk Road, found according to the map, I must say something about maps. We had old maps. And we didn't have fresh maps of the Pakistan territory. So one of my friends from the academy, about a year junior to me, was in the map mapping business, and he's a very fine officer. He was in my company in the academy. I know him, a chap called Kishore. He joined the engineers. He was doing map production of map. I asked him, I said, well, why aren't we got good maps of this area? He said, we just don't have the maps. So in other words, we had maps up to our own side. Nobody knew where the Ichagal Canal was. So somebody had captured some maps of Pakistan with the beautiful maps they had, by the Americans, and they had everything marked there. So one map, there must have been about 30, 40,000 troops. You get one map, and so somebody copied with a pencil, trying to a line where the Ichagal Canal was. So we went to war without proper maps. And that is a disadvantage, I must tell you. So we learned our lessons. It took us many years to have satellites, etc., to look across the border and map marking, you see. And many people drew the Ichagal Canal on their maps with pencil or with ink, sometimes 1,000, 2,000 meters wrong in its alignment. But whatever. We found that one area of the Ichagal Canal, there was a viaduct. You know what a viaduct is? That the canal passes on a bridge.
Yeah.
And there was space underneath. So we sent a battalion of infantry over there to capture. And they captured within a few hours. And we got compliments that, look, thank you. You captured a crossing of the Ichagal Canal where tanks and other things and guns can go across into Punjab or Pakistan. And that will be a threat to them. But as I tell you the story, within a couple of hours, we suddenly found that there were no communications with this battalion. And we tried to contact them, we could not contact them. Then from the Corps headquarters, an officer with a jeep and a radio set to find out what happened. So he went off there and he explained to us, he came to that area, he found nobody there. For the commanding officer who was sitting on a, those shooting stick that you have, is a stick which opens up like a chair, with his head in his hands. Where's your battalion? He said, they all ran away. Why did they run away? The Pakistan opened up with corps artillery. Now these are green troops. Green troops are troops who have not been in battle before. When you're doing exercises, you teach troops that as soon as you capture a position, you must dig deep to trenches and get yourself below the ground. And then as soon as you can, get overhead protection. And put logs of wood and a lot of mud and stones on top so that you are secure from enemy artillery. What they do in exercises is they dig about 2-3 feet. And the trench khod diya humne. Because it's an effort after all to dig a trench which is 6 feet deep. So the Pakistani corps artillery opened up these ships more or less in the open. Now, what is the effect of artillery fire on human beings? When medium artillery comes down on human beings, you don't know what happens to your mind. Your mind gets shattered. So much noise, so much shrapnel, so many people dying. That a man does not know whether he's coming or going. He can't even think. You require very high quality leadership when officers must show themselves to muster the troops and to give them a sense of well-being that here's my boss. You have to open yourself to the artillery fire as an officer. We learned that lesson for the next war, which was 71 war. If you don't do that, the troops just break and run because they run as fast as their lives can carry them. And that particular battalion, I mean, we disappeared with a clean pair of heels. And I think we had to round them up after months after the war, or run back to their villages or something. That happens. It happens on both sides. It happens in every army of the world. Nobody talks about it. But I must tell you, it's not easy. It's not that you always succeed. You have a lot of failures. So anyway, that is Wagah border. Come further south, this division, you see Wagah border, we had 54 infantry division, and they held their own. And on the central axis from Burki, from Bhikiwin to Uttar, there's a crossroads, and the road goes to Lahore via a place called Burki. We had a division there, commanded by Major General Sibal, who rose to the rank of an army commander later. He succeeded very well. He went right up to Burki, which is in Pakistan territory, and after a big attack, he managed to capture it. So compliments. Now the battalion which captured Burki was the 4th Sikhs. It's a Sikh regiment. Now to tell you the example of the 4 Sikhs, you may have heard of Saragari. Saragari was a fight that took place in 1890 or so, where there's one picket of the same battalion of Sikhs had a small picket where about 30 men, attacked by thousands of tribals, Afghan tribals. Right. And there was a JCO in charge, and he refused to withdraw. There was no officer. A relief column was sent by the British Indian Army. But the chap beat back the Afghan attacks again and again. And eventually these 25 people or 22 people, every one of them was killed. Only the runner who was sent back to tell the next picket that for God's sake, come on, relieve us because we are being attacked by hordes of Afghan tribal. That is the only man who came back and saw the disaster that took place. Every man was killed on his post. But there were thousands of Afghans lying dead outside that picket. That Saragiri is a famous song called Saragiri also. And it's a very great feather in the cap of the 4 Sikhs. It's the same battalion which captured Turkey. More about this another minute. In the south, there was Khemkaran, where the Pakistan armored infantry were attacked. Now there are 2 things which made this Pakistani attack a thorough failure. Number 1 was that, canal waters agreement. I told you that in 1954 there was a canal waters agreement where India had built certain canals. We had built the Gang Canal and certain canal waters from the Ravi River, from Madhopur near Pathankot, come down here and to give water to the desert. This canal comes to Rajasthan sector. There's the Gang Canal which comes to Ganganagar district, and they have a number of canals coming here. So the canal waters people contacted our military. How can we help, they said. So we decided to open the canals in certain places to flood certain areas of our defended area, which the Pakistanis didn't know. That in Punjab, for instance, the ground is so soft, with the water table very close to the surface. If you flood the waters, the Pakistani pattern tanks that the Americans had given them, they happen to be straight down if they go to. Now, we had marked on our maps the areas which were no tank should go there. The Pakistanis know that. So as they came in, many of the tanks just sank. The others who got through, there was a funnel. They had the Itogal Canal Hudiara drain on the western side, and they had the Sutlej River coming in on the eastern side. So they were coming from a narrow area trying to spread. Now, armor attacks must have plenty of space so they could go wide out flanking movements here and there. They were unable to do that. Now, they wanted to go towards Vyas. Now, if you look at the map of Punjab, one road from, they kept at Khemkaran, which is a town in Punjab. One road goes straight north to Biki Bindukar and then to Amritsar. One route goes to the east, goes to Harike headworks where the Sutlej River comes, and there's a huge canal system there, the dams and all that, there's a huge lake system. And, they control the waters going further south, to Rajasthan and to southern Rajasthan and all that, and to southern Punjab. Take that route. There was the division headquarters there, the famous Four Eagle Division. Had general officer commanding there, managed to stand his ground. He had dug his headquarters down, and you know what they do is they dig their headquarters down and then take a plow and plow it the whole area, so that the aircraft and all that sees only plowed fields. They don't realize there's a whole division headquarters under the ground. They had sent that week 2 brigades forward to defend Khemkaran. Those chaps came running back because there was a huge attack by Pakistan Armored Division and Pakistan Infantry Division. Now, what the Pakistan Armored commander did, he sent one tank regiment, 16 Lancers, I think it was, commanded by a Parsi officer, lieutenant of the Parsis, to do a wide outflanking movement and cut off the defenses of Asal Uttar, as it is called, which we knew our brigade headquarters was there. Cut about 10 kilometers further north, the axis. But this chap came through the Ganna fields. He saw the road in front of him, and he sent a message to his div commander that, yes, I've cut the axis. But just at that moment, as God would have it, one of our tank squadrons, Centurion tanks, was trundling down this road very fast because they had been asked to go to Amritsar, but they were called back when the Armored Division attack took place by Pakistan. So he's rushing back to his positions. And, the tank squadron commander told his gunner, who was a Sardar, that look, there must be a lot of wind in Punjab because this huge gunner field, 8 tall, and they're moving left and right like this. Sarji looked at that, he says, Saab, that is not wind, it is tanks coming through this. So on the road, this tank squadron just halted. Centurion tank is a very well built, very solid steel, like 6 inches of armor and all that, very sharp, good gun. They can do a neutral turn. That means you stop and you, without the engine, and the engine is running, but without going forward or backward, you just pull the stick and the whole tank can swivel around in any direction. Swivel to the right, and he just gave an order, enemy tanks, open fire at will. Now, because the Centurion tank has a very high velocity shell that is fired, there are 3 types of shells. One is a APFSDS, this armored piercing, stabilized discarding sabot. That means really the bore is this big. Okay. To fill that, we have got 2 of material to give the fitting inside the bore of the gun. The full blast comes when you fire the shell. As it emanates from the barrel, the sabot fall aside, and there's a still metal about that long, it's about 2 feet long. It's made of tungsten steel. It's shaped like an arrow with metal feathers at the back. It goes straight like that. It has a range of up to about 2,000 yards. Point blank. It's zeroed at 2,000 yards. It can penetrate anything. It's with a very high muzzle velocity. The muzzle velocity of a Centurion Mark 6, 47,000 feet per second per second. And every second, it's got that velocity. It hits the enemy armor and melts through, and the molten metal that has gone through, flying around inside, kills all the crew. It is fire, right? So we had, because it is a very high muzzle velocity, the whole tank shakes, a lot of dust and all that sort of thing. I'm describing this to you because I had done the infantry school in Warminster in England course. Now they knew that I was on the chief staff, and they suddenly heard that the British Centurion has really killed all the American Patton tanks. And they were very thrilled to know the Indians had used Centurion so well, and they wanted to know how you did it. So because it has a very high muzzle velocity, we had decided a system of firing this tank. That means you put the crosshairs of the sights are times 10 magnification. You put the crosshairs onto the target, and then you fire the first round. You just put your hand wheel slightly up and fire it again, and put it slightly down. Fire. So 3 rounds must go very fast.
Okay.
Don't see where you're going. What you've got to do is to get the line correct. So you fire a high explosive shell. So one of the shells is a high explosive, bangs and it sort of explodes. Then you fire the armored piercing shells, 3.
Okay.
And what you find is that at 400 meters, because the accuracy of this gun is up to 2,000 meters.
Oh.
400 meters is like putting a pistol on somebody's head and shooting, so it can't miss. So the whole 4 cavalry of Pakistan was written off in a matter of 2 minutes. Each tank had 3 rounds inside it.
Oh, wow.
One in the center, one through the turret, one through the other. The second point is that the first round, to make sure that the line of the gun is correct, is a high explosive. You see, because it explodes. That aligns his sight correctly for line. After that, the 3 shots are very flat trajectory, and because the tank is an upstanding target, you hit very easily. It's a very sharp, flat trajectory. What happens is that when the high explosive hits the Pakistani tanks, Pakistanis thought that all they wanted, they have toolboxes outside the turret, the tools and the bedding of the crew. They removed the tools and the bedding and they filled it with ammunition. Because what you want if you want to attack India is to have ammunition and fuel for the engine. So you can go deep and have plenty of ammunition to shoot. Since the toolboxes had ammunition, when the high explosive round hits the tank and big dhamaka explosion takes place, all those ammunition in the toolboxes were set off. They started firing. The result, tanks caught fire. American tanks catch fire very easily. We used to call them the Ronson burner. The Ronson burner is what people use for cigarette lighting. So, in the Pakistani crew, they jump out because if they die in the fire, they become Hindu.
Oh.
Hindus burn the dead. Muslims bury the dead. If a Muslim feels that he's going to burn, he says, I'll become a Hindu, so he has to jump out of his tank, prefer to be buried rather than to be burnt. So he jumps into the fields, generally you pick it. So I had come from Rania, driving like hell to come down to this. I knew the armored tape was attacking, so I landed up in Theograj's office. Theograj is there. The Brigadier Theograj was commanding the 2nd Independent Armored Brigade. He had 2 regiments of Shermans and 1 regiment of 3rd Cavalry, which is the Centurion tanks. And later, we got a part of a regiment of 7th Cavalry, which had the PT-76, floating tank, Russian floating tank. When I reached this headquarters, I was amazed to see a line of prisoners looking very gross. There are about 30 Pakistani prisoners with their hands tied behind the back, sitting. When you get caught as a prisoner, you feel down and out. And this Parsi Lieutenant Colonel, the adjutant, another couple of officers, squadron commanders, looking very morose, lined up outside the headquarters with their hands tied behind the back. waiting for them to be sent back. And then I came to the headquarters. There was a grove of trees. There was a mound in the center of the grove of trees. And there was a moon charpai, a four-legged bed, that string on which the brigade commander, Brigadier Chograj, was sitting. When I came, he said, "Okay, BN, you come and join me on my moon charpai." I joined him there. Then all his regimental commanders was on moon charpai sitting around this, because all the command tanks had been handed over for the defense of the battle that was going on against the Pakistan armored attack. Shermans had gone forward, and as the Shermans got killed, thrown up, the command tank, because every colonel has 3 tanks in his regimental headquarters, those were sent forward to act as defending tanks. So these are there with the radio sets, all 3 lieutenant colonels, including Arun Vedya, who later became the chief. He's a Deccan horse. He got the Mahavir Chakra for this battle. And in 21 war, he got another Mahavir Chakra. So he became the army chief with 2 Mahavir Chakras. Mahavir Chakra and Ba. So that is Arun Vedya, and they've done all very well. Chograj had so many tanks that instead of his ribbons here, he's wearing the badges, 4 tank regiments of the Pakistan Armored Division. So that's a good sight to see. And then one of the officers of 3rd Cavalry, who was from my classmate actually from the academy, 3rd Cavalry, he was the second in command. He was sent out in a patrol to capture some of these Pakistanis who had jumped out of their tanks and were hiding in the Cheti, the Ganna, the fields of Kudake. He rounded them up. And then he found there was a whole M48 Pakistan tank, brand new, abandoned. He got into the driver's seat and switched on the engine and started up. So he sent a radio message that, "Don't shoot at me. I'm bringing this tank back to the headquarters." So he brought the Pakistani tank back to the headquarters, fully functional.
Okay.
And on the speedometer, there was only 48 kilometers. It's a brand new tank. The training of the Pakistan army was not done, since they didn't do training to try and get extra tank.
Right.
They say that those whom the gods would destroy, God first make them mad. If you don't train properly, how can you fight your battle? Second point I want to tell you, when the Pakistan Armored Division was attacking, they were shouting on the radio, "Allahu Akbar, Kafir ko maro, Allahu Akbar." Now, God is not going to support you if you keep taking God's name. You've got to fight a good battle. You have to fight the battle. They came to grief. I think we killed the division commander. We killed the artillery brigade commander who's with him. In fact, the cap badge and the stick of that artillery brigade commander is in the officers' mess of the 9 Deccan Horse. One of my very close friends, Jagat Vora, who passed out from the military academy with the Sword of Honor and the gold medal for passing out number 1st. He was commanding the squadron on one side, the Asad Uttar. Now I saw this battle very well. We had on the west of this road, toward the Pakistan border, we had a battalion of infantry, commanded by a man called Lieutenant Colonel Farak Bhatti, Grenadiers Battalion. And on the east side of the road, we had 18 Rajre, commanded by the second in command, Raghuveer Singh. I still remember the name, because in battle you don't forget any name. And a Deccan Horse Squadron, commanded by, squadron has about 14 tanks, Sherman tanks, commanded by Jagat Vora, my friend, was in support of the western side. And he told me, I went and met him. I said, "Just explain to me how this battle," because along this road, which was in between Farak Bhatti's battalion and the Rajrif battalion, a line of 7 or 8 Pakistani packet tanks all burning. So I went across and I told Jagat, "Please explain to me what this happened." We didn't know. We saw these tanks coming along the road. And we said, "We can't recognize this tank. Probably it's that new AMX tank which we had bought from France, which is a small tank."
Okay.
Somebody said, look, it's got a huge turret. It's going up the road. And somebody said, look, there's Urdu lettering on the turret. Because every turret has a number marking which tank it is. So this is Urdu written there. It must be Pakistani. So they swung their guns around and shot it up. And why that happened is because the 4 cavalry of Pakistan, which had cut the axis about 10-15 miles further up north, had given the clear to the university of the division. He thought the enemy was in the back, they'd all run away because he cut the axis at the back, and he advanced his whole division along the road and came to grief. And Farag Bhatti's battalion on the west of the road, there was a battalion in position. They had a few mines in front of them, and they had 6 guns of anti-tank recoilless guns. Now, the recoilless gun is an anti-tank weapon. It fires a shell in front, which penetrates the enemy armor and has a huge blast at the back. That's why it's recoilless. The gun doesn't come back. It's a blast at the back. This is mounted on a jeep. So this is the RCL platoon, as they call it, of an infantry battalion. There are 6 such weapons in the battalion. And the man commanding it was a Havaldar Abdul Hamid. He got the Paramveer Chakra. Okay. Abdul Hamid belongs to, he belongs to near Bihar, Jharkhand actually. In those days it was Bihar, now it's Jharkhand and Bihar. And Abdul Hamid found that all the infantry were down in cover, they had overhead protection. And when the Pakistani medium artillery started falling on the battalion, since his tanks were attacking, the Ahmadiyya tank, he found that his guns were out in the open because the gun has to, you can dig it down about 3 or 4 feet to hide the jeep. But the gun itself has to be in the open because that's how it fires. He literally ran away from there to save his guns from the artillery and went into high Ganna Kheti. 8 feet tall sugarcane, right? He went inside there. Now, when he went inside there, he poked one of the guns out from the side and he saw 6 tanks of the Pakistanis attacking in line up to this infantry position. Yeah. He fired 3 or 4 rounds and killed 2 tanks straight away. Oh. Those people suddenly found from the flank this anti-tank fire coming and 2-3 of their leading tanks were killed. They said, this is getting too hot. So they turned around and went away, but they first fired a lot of high explosive shells into the sugarcane field where the fire was coming from. Right. And Abdul Hamid got killed. He died, but he had killed 2-3 enemy tanks, and he had saved the attack on his battalions. He got the Paramveer Chakra. So these are sort of stories I wanted to tell you. And Salim Caleb is a Lieutenant Colonel Salim Caleb, who was commanding 3rd Cavalry. Now, he's a very fine officer, Armored Corps officer. I knew him from the time when he was a captain and then a major. And now he was a Lieutenant Colonel commanding the team. Salim Caleb is actually a Christian person, Muslim converted to Christianity. But the first name, Salim, is a Muslim name. Yeah. It's a Christian name. Yeah. So he had organized the defenses of 3rd Cavalry, which is with this brigade at Asalota, so well, because they dropped up the armored division. He got a Mahavir Chakra in the field itself. Okay. So in his tank Dangri, when the award was announced by the government, he was wearing his Mahavir Chakra while the battle was going on. Oh my. Because the people did so well. I happened to write his citation because my English was good. I was sitting in the Corps headquarters for some time, and the BGS of the Corps was a chap called Prakash Garewal from the Dogra Regiment, who was a friend of mine from Babina when I was a captain. This man in the infantry battalion, I told you that he had a largest Sikh parade. All the people used to go to his Sikh parade because the doctor was so good, giving various types of liquid to people, colored liquid, red one, green one, blue one, and got everybody with sugar water. So he was commanding that battalion then as a lieutenant colonel, and now he had become a brigadier. He was the BGS. Corps, and a person called Jubinder Dhillon, who was an engineers officer. He was a lieutenant general commanding the Corps, 11th Corps, and they broke the Pakistani armored division attack. This is the main thing that happened on the Western Front. Now, General Chaudhary, being a cavalry officer, always wants to attack. So having done the hedgehog principle that put two, 3 brigades across the Pakistan border, and the armored division where he had left a Centurion regiment to hoodwink the Pakistanis, he concentrated his armored division opposite Amritsar with all the signposting, etc., so that the Pakistani intelligence would think that we were opposite Amritsar. But he actually moved the division to Jammu and Kashmir, to the area between Pathankot and Jammu, which is a place called Samba.
Yes.
There is a new corps called One Corps, and it was commanded. One corps was raised by a friend of his called Lieutenant General Pat Dunn, and this was raised on the spur of the moment. He gave the whole armored division, less this one regiment of centurions, to Pat Dunn with 2 infantry divisions, and told them to attack south of Samba into the Shakargarh salient of Pakistan. Pakistan is a Shakargarh salient coming into India, and the north of the salient is the Jammu Kashmir, Jammu and Pathankot border, and in the east of it is the Pathankot Amritsar border. It's called the Shakargarh salient. He went into that from there, causing alarm and despondency to the Pakistanis, because the best form, as Napoleon said, of defense is to attack. I must give it to General Chaudhary, he did that. And Lal Bahadur Shastri supported this. Compliments to Lal Bahadur Shastri. The result was that when the stalemate took place, we had a large amount of Pakistan territory across the Wagah border. Plus, we had a large number of villages in the Rajasthan which we had captured. And then it captured approximately 13 to 15 kilometers of the Pakistan territory south of Samba. See? Now, this is the end of the war there. And in Kashmir, of course, you heard that we captured Hajipir Pass. Now, Lal Bahadur Shastri, I must say 1 or 2 things about it. He said that when the war finishes, I can't that everybody goes back to their own place and the international borders remain intact. This is the first time in war where you have captured enemy territory, and they have captured some of yours. Well, Lal Bahadur said, you will go back to your original positions. Now, this is a very interesting thought. You capture enemy territory, then for the next so many years, they attempt by the enemy to recapture that territory. But Lal Bahadur Shastri said, everybody goes back to their own spot. That's the first point. Second slogan that he said was Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. He said there are 2 people important in this country, the Kisan, who is tilling the fields, and the Jawan, who is protecting the land.
Right.
So he wanted to give that vow to the military. But now I must tell you, Nivedita, whenever the Indian army has succeeded in battle against all odds, like the 47-48 war in Kashmir, we were caught by surprise and yet we managed to hold our own. The 65 war, when we were caught by surprise again at a very weak position, but we managed to hold our own. We got compliments from everybody. We got compliments from the Prime Minister, the cabinet. But our salaries were reduced and the hierarchy and position of the military officer was reduced. You know, you have an order of precedence. So every time we win a war, the army is put down further in the order of precedence. Order of precedence means that whenever there is a function, where does the army chief stand and where does anybody else stand? So we all lower and lower down in scale. Bureaucrats come before us and everybody else comes before us, all the ministers come before us, all the judges come before us, and so on. So that is what happens in this country. So every time we have won a war, our salaries have also been reduced. That's why a big fight by ex-servicemen for proper salaries and things, because we have been reduced in our salaries. Whereas we should, after retirement, get 75% of our salaries. Bureaucrats used to get 25% of their salaries. Today, the bureaucrat gets more than 50% of his salary down as pension, and the army gets 25%. So there's a big fight going on because every time you reduce, whenever we win a war. So anyway, that's interesting. We still go ahead and win our wars because we have to do what we have to. Now in the 65 for Kosygin of Russia, who was the Prime Minister of Russia, there was Brezhnev was the number one chairman of the Communist Party. Kosygin and Brezhnev decided that they will create peace. So they asked Pakistan and India to stop fighting. And they come to Tashkent, which is part of Russia in those days, Uzbekistan, the capital of Uzbekistan, which is part of Russia. So the Tashkent Agreement was done in 1966, where it was decided as per Shastri's desire that all troops will go back to the original as per discussion between the two sides. And old position of the border will be restored, except where the two sides agree not to restore it. For instance, in Kashmir, unfortunately, we had won Hajipir Pass with great difficulty, and we won the Kargil Heights with great difficulty. But we lost something in Akhnur and the Punch in the Akhnur sector, Khamjoria, it is called. And that affected our road to the western side of the, to Poonch and to Rajouri. So the decision between Pakistan and us at that time, paid by Kosygin, was that, all right, we will allow Pakistan to retain a certain portion of the Cham area. They kept it quite a lot. We said, you go back up to the Munawar Tawi, it's that area you take, which was very easily captured by them. But they said, in exchange for that, you please give us back our Hajipir Pass and give us back the Kargil Heights. So we gave the Kargil Heights back to Pakistan, and we gave the Hajipir Pass back to Pakistan, much to the disgust of all of us who knew the way battles were fought in Kashmir. We made that to the Tashkent Agreement, and peace was declared in 1965. It was the Tashkent Agreement was decided. And we were in Pakistan territory, and I formed up in front of the chief. I said, I want to go back to my regiment because 16 Cavalry had a few setbacks. And I said, I must get back to my regiment. So the chief came, and I'd done only 6 months with him. And he said, look, your wife is not going to be very happy with this because she'll have to give up a house. I said, that doesn't matter. It's a soldier's wife. And so I'd like to get back to my regiment. He said, all right, I'll let her retain that accommodation for a few more months. Meanwhile, you go and join your regiment. And my regiment was, it's called Maharajpur, which is on the Pakistan side of the border south of the armored division was there. So 16 Cavalry was also there. Now, I just explained what happened in 16 Cavalry because they had a bit of a setback. They were leading the advance of the armored division as they crossed the border. Manchurian tanks. And the first position where they came to opposition by the Pakistanis was a place called Gadgor, which is about 8 or 9 kilometers inside the Pakistan territory. Gadgor is a nala with a village there. And they got tank fire against them. But they'd been told that there are no tanks here. You go like a knife through butter because Pakistan has got no armor. So the intelligence report. There was the Pakistan Armored Division, we were leading. Suddenly they found that 7 or 8 of our tanks have been knocked out. And the crews came back because when there are 2 dead bodies inside the tank, the other 2 chaps have to get off, they can't run the tank. And they said, oh, these chaps have left the tanks and run away. That was not the case. I got back to the squadron there and I did a report of inquiry and I showed people that this is not what happened. When a tank is hit and 2 chaps are dead, driver and whoever survived have to get off and come back. They can't run the tank. There's another thing about the Centurion. The Centurion has got an electric gunfire system. So when the tank gets hit, the electrical systems get destroyed. Then you can't fire the gun. So that was it. And our brigade commander was a chap called K.K. Singh, who had commanded 16 Cavalry. And he took a dim view of the fact that you all came running back. Now, he was experienced in World War II when General Chaudhary was commanding the regiment. They had gone with Field Marshal Lord Slim, he was known as Lieutenant General Slim in those days, who took the Indian Army right from Manipur area down to Rangoon and captured all the territory. And we fired, we did a number of battles there, the Battle of Bictella and the Battle of various places. And we got a lot of battle honors there.